لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين ونصلي ونسلم على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. So moving on, in the last lesson, Al-Hāfidh Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala completed the discussion regarding the different types of al-khabar in terms of how they've been transmitted to us. And just to recap, we mentioned that in terms of transmission, in terms of al-wusul, how these reports have reached us, we can categorize the prophetic reports and all reports in general into 4 categories. First category is that report which was transmitted by way of mass transmission, via mass transmission. And that is a report where there are so many individuals in each generation that are transmitting this report that an individual attains certainty that this transmission is 100% authentic and there could not have been a mistake or a misunderstanding that was transmitted. Rather, it is 100% a report which has been transmitted with perfection. The second report is that type which is 3 or more in each generation. So in each generation, a minimum of 3. And again, when we say a minimum of 3, that's usually going to be in the first 2 generations. And then after that, it becomes, because as time goes on, the asanid expand. They don't decrease. So the natural progression of transmission is that more and more people will transmit as we go on in the years, generation upon generation. So in the first and second generation, for example, you have 3, and after that, or a minimum of 3 in one of the generations, usually going to be one of the first generations, one of the first few generations, and after that, it will expand and increase beyond 3 as well. This is known as al-mashhur, but it doesn't reach the level of the first. That is the point. It will not reach the amount of the first category where it's 100% authentic, or we are able to attain 100% certainty that there is no mistake in this transmission. The third category is that in a minimum, or in a minimum of 2 narrators are found in each generation, in each tabaqa, in each level of transmission. And the fourth category is in any one level of transmission, there is only one narrator. The third one we call al-aziz, and the fourth one we call al-gharib. And we mentioned that al-mashhur, al-aziz, and al-gharib, these 3 are usually used in a relative manner. So they will normally use these terms relative to a certain narrator. So in the chain, relative to this narrator, this hadith is mashhur, for example. Or they'll say, for example, in the chain, relative to this narrator, the hadith is aziz. Hadithun azizun min riwayati fulan. They'll say hadithun gharibun an fulan, or min hadithi fulan. Commonly, these terms are used relative to a certain narrator in the chain, although we mentioned all of the scenarios that the terms are able to be used. Now, what is the purpose? As we mentioned before, whenever you make a categorization in any discipline, there has to be a reason for that categorization. So the Nahwiyun, the scholars of syntax, they don't categorize the asma into jamid, mushtaq, and masdar just for the sake of categorizing the asma into those categories. There is a purpose behind it. Likewise, in ilm al-mustalah, when it comes to categorizing the reports in terms of how they've reached us in these different categories, there has to be a purpose behind it. And that purpose is what Al-Hāfidh Ibn Hajar will refer to right now, which is our certainty regarding the report. And based on that, how we treat or how we act upon the report. So number 1, he says, وَكُلُّهَا سِوَى الْأَوَّلِ آحَادٍ. All of them other than the first category, meaning other than mutawatir, the other 3 categories, mashhur, aziz, and gharib, all 3 of these categories are called, in the istilah of the muhaddithin, they're called ahad. And again, this is also taken from the usuliyun, and we're going to make an ishara, we're going to mention this as well. All of them are called ahad. The linguistic definition of al-ahad, linguistically, ahad is the plural of wahid. or ahad. And there are some linguists that said ahad should not have a plural. Ahad should not have a plural. Rather, ahad should be the plural of wahid. Of wahid. طيب. And as for istilahan, yani in the terminology of the scholars of hadith, when they use or when they refer to reports as ahad, khabarul wahid, or they also say khabarul ahad, or they'll say al-ahad, or they'll say al-akhbar al-ahad. When they refer to reports as being from the ahad, or they say this report is khabarul wahid, what are they referring to? It is ma lam yajma' shurut al-mutawatir. Any report that does not reach the level of tawatur. All of them are called ahad. All of them are called ahad. So Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni, he says, وَلَا يُرَادُ بِخَبَرِ الْوَاحِدِ الْخَبَرَ الَّذِي يَنْقُلُهُ الْوَاحِدِ. And when they say خَبَرُ الْوَاحِد, they're not trying to say that it's the report that only one individual is transmitting. That would be a misunderstanding. Even though linguistically, that's what it seems like. When you say خَبَرُ الْوَاحِد, the khabar, the report of one individual. So you would think that khabar al-wahid is referring to one individual transmitting it, one narrator transmitting, but that's not true. What are they intending? ولكن كل خبر عن جائز ممكن لا سبيل إلى القطع بصدقه ولا إلى القطع بكذبه or بكذبه. What are they referring to when they say khabar al-wahid? They're trying to refer to every report where we cannot 100% be certain that it's true, and neither can we be 100% certain that it's a lie. Meaning it's possible there could be a mistake in the transmission, and it's possible that in terms of transmission it was true. But we cannot attain certainty regarding either or. لا اضطرارا ولا استدلالا. Neither by way of deduction, rational deduction, and neither by way of rational necessity. We're just not able to arrive at certainty that either 100% this transmission is valid and authentic, or 100% the transmission is non-authentic. All of these reports are called al-ahad, and they're classified as khabar al-wahid. Khabar al-wahid. So when we say al-ahad in the terminology, and again this is being taken from the usuliyun, Imam al-Haramain is usuli, al-Juwayni rahimahullah ta'ala. When they use the term al-ahad, they're referring to all those reports where you cannot be 100% certain that either it's true or 100% certain that it's a lie. So everything which is not mutawatir, the other three, which is mashhur, aziz, and gharib, all of them are termed as al-ahad. طيب, what is the benefit of this? When it comes to tawatur, we say and Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar already mentioned the hukum of tawatur, where he said, فَالْأَوَّلُ الْمُتَوَاتِرُ الْمُفِيدُ لِلْعِلْمِ الْيَقِينِيِّ بِشُرُوطِهِ. What is the benefit of a report which is mutawatir? The benefit of a report which is being transmitted by way of tawatur is that it grants certain, 100% certain, necessary knowledge. Meaning there is no doubt that is the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's as if there would be no difference in you hearing the statement from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam versus you receiving it by way of tawatur from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in your certainty that is the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you are as certain that it's a statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though you haven't heard it from him directly. But it's as if you've heard it from him directly. That's how much certainty you have that this is the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is attained in the hadith which is mutawatir. That is attained in the hadith which is mutawatir. That's why Al-Hafidh said, فَالْأَوَّلُ الْمُتَوَاتِرُ الْمُفِيدُ لِلْعِلْمِ الْيَقِينِ. As long as the conditions of tawatur are found, meaning we can call it mutawatir, it grants you certain definite knowledge, as if you were hearing it directly from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. Meaning there's no doubt that this is a statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But that's not the case with ahad. What is the hukum of ahad? Okay, so now again, the purpose of this categorization is that we say tawatur grants you certain belief that that's the statement of the Messenger. If you deny that statement, it's as if you're denying the statement directly after hearing it from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And anyone who denies something they hear directly from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we say that is kufr. So if it's established that there's a report that has been transmitted by way of tawatur, and someone is informed of that report, and he directly says that I will not accept this, and I don't believe in this, and it's been proven to him that no, you got to understand, this is the statement of the messenger, and it's proven by way of tawatur, meaning we have no doubt this, he actually said this, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he still wishes to say, I don't want to follow him, or I don't want to follow this report, or what it says, or I don't believe in this, then it's as if he is denying the messenger directly to his face, and that is kufr. So we attain a hukum. What is the command? The one who denies something which has been transmitted by way of tawatur, if sometimes people don't know. Like it's possible someone doesn't know something is mutawatir. Like there are a lot of individuals that don't even know how to pray Surah Fatiha properly. So there could be a Muslim who just doesn't know. That's fine. But if the hujjah, if the proof has been established upon that individual that this is 100% the statement of the Messenger ﷺ, and then he still wishes to deny it, then that will be kufr. That is disbelief. So when we categorize, we say with the first one, denying it is a big deal, is a big deal. The rest of them though, Al-Hafiz says, what is the hukum? And what is the result and the command pertaining to the rest other than mutawatir? He says, وَفِيهَا الْمَقْبُولُ وَالْمَرْدُودُ لِتَوَقُّفِ الْإِسْتِدْلَالِ بِهَا عَلَى الْبَحْثِ عَنْ أَحْوَالِ رُوَاتِهَا دُونَ الْأَوَّلِ. In the rest of them, mashhur, aziz, and gharib, all of them, the remainder other than tawatur, there are certain reports that will be accepted, and there are certain reports that will be rejected. Meaning, in the rest of them, we have to apply a process of authentication based on ijtihad. We have to apply rules and create a process of that will help us filter out the weak reports from the authentic reports. We have to create and introduce a filter that will assist us by filtering, that will assist us to filter out the weak from the authentic. Because these reports, we don't have certainty that they're actually the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, if a report is a statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that is legislation. That is shara'. That is the prescribing of commandments, and we follow what the Messenger says. And he is the one who has explained to us the way this religion is. But if a report has not been proven to be a statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we don't follow it. So the whole purpose over here is determining and authenticating what did the Messenger actually say sallallahu alaihi wasallam and what has he not said. So in these reports, we have to create a process of filterizing, or a process of filtering the authentic from the weak. طيب. And that process entails looking at the narrators. We search the narrators and we create a degree of rules or a number of rules and guidelines that will assist us in this filtering process. Like when he says, وَفِيهَا الْمَقْبُولُ وَالْمَرْدُودُ, al-maqbul, when it becomes maqbul, and if a narration is determined to be considered al-maqbul, then we say this narration yujibu al-amal. And this is according to everyone. This is according to the muhaddithin and the usuliyin. Al-fiqh, we say, al-fiqh, in the science of jurisprudence, we say even if a report is not 100% established from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but most probably it's established from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we say هذا يوجب العمل. This will necessitate action upon that report. This will necessitate action upon that report. And even in our daily lives, life is not lived in line with only reports that are attained by way of tawatur. Like for example, if you hear news, even from one individual, that there's a program going on, for example, in a certain masjid, let's go join the program. There's no reason for you to doubt that. So you follow along with it. Okay. If you hear, for example, in the news from one individual, like one of your friends, you meet your friend and he tells you that there is a massive storm that's coming and you haven't heard it from anywhere else. But you go back home and you start preparing and making sure that, okay, if the storm is coming, we got to figure out when is it coming, how's it going to come, and so on and so forth. So our daily life is not based on reports that are transmitted by way of tawatur. No one lives like that. No one, every single time, for example, you hear the transmission of a report, are you doubting its authenticity? No one is so skeptical where he will doubt every single report until he receives that report from so many individuals that is proven to him by way of tawatur. No one lives life like that. One person tells you, two people tell you, three people tell you, and that's it. You move on with it. You accept it and you move on. So in our daily life, the majority of our actions, the majority of our experiences in our daily lives are not based on reports that are transmitted by way of tawatur. And neither are we looking for reports that are transmitted by way of tawatur. If there's no reason to doubt, even if you don't have certainty, the default is that you move along with it. You move along with it. And likewise is the science of fiqh and jurisprudence. When it comes to actions, we are not looking for certainty before we establish that an action should be acted upon. If it's most probable, like 90% sure, no reason to doubt, we say you have to act upon it. You have to act upon it. And that is the way life runs in general. So we say the ahad, even if they don't provide certainty, 100% certainty that the messenger actually said this, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they still necessitate action. We still act upon them. We still will act in line with what they are informing us. طيب. However, this is after it's determined to be maqbool. So again, we need a filtering process to make sure that it becomes maqbool. Once it attains the level of maqbool, then after that we say yujibul amal. But that filtering process that is placed, what is the filtering process? How do we filter out the authentic from the non-authentic? That filtering process entails ijtihad. It is a set of rules and guidelines that have not been revealed from the sky, have not been revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, the ulama, they come together and through their ijtihad, they have prepared a set of rules and guidelines in their minds that will allow them to filter out what is authentic from what is weak, what is acceptable from what is not acceptable. And is it possible sometimes they can differ in that process? The answer is yes. And they have differed. So overall, we will say yes. Overall, generically, they all have a filtering process, but sometimes the ulama can differ in what is considered to be al-maqbool and what is considered to be al-mardood. And this is where the science of usul al-hadith actually overlaps with usul al-fiqh. When it comes to the discussion of al-maqbool wal-mardood, we don't only look at the statement of the muhaddithin. The muhaddithun have a filtering process, and we're going to study that filtering process in mustalah al-hadith. What is the filtering process that was adopted by the muhaddithun to filter out the authentic from the weak? But the usuliyun also have a filtering process that they apply and they act upon. And yes, at times it can overlap with the process of the muhaddithin, but at times it can differ. So according to the process of muhaddithin, there might be a hadith which is maqbool. But according to the process of the usuliyin, that same hadith is actually mardood. You don't act upon it. According to their filtering process. And sometimes according to the filtering process of the muhaddithin, there might be a hadith which you don't act upon. It's mardood. But according to the filtering process of the usuliyin, it's actually maqbool. You should act upon it. So the process of determining al-maqbool wal-mardood is based on al-istidlal, and there can be room for disagreement in al-istidlal. And there is room, and they have differed. And this is why from the get-go, understand this, ahbab. The process that we're going to study in mustalah, which the usuliyun, which the muhaddithun will use and apply in order to determine which report from the ahad is maqbool and which report from the ahad is mardood. This is the process which is applied, but that process is based on ijtihad. And even within the muhaddithun, sometimes they differ. Even with using one process, they will still differ sometimes, whether a certain report is actually al-maqbool or al-mardood. So there is room for a degree of ijtihad when it comes to determining whether a report is al-maqbool or whether it will be in the category of al-mardood. And not only the muhaddithun differ, the usuliyun also have their own process. So you can actually think of each of the madhahib arba'a, the Hanafi madhab, the Shafi'i madhab, the Maliki madhab, the Hanbali madhab, as their own process of filtering these reports in order to determine ما الذي يوجب العمل به وما الذي يترك. And each madhab, when they determine ahkam, that is their final verdict. So the hukum you study, for example, in the Shafi'i madhab, that is what the Shafi'i madhab has determined to be al-maqbool. For example, if the Shafi'i madhab says we take this hadith, we take this narration, we act upon it, that's what the Shafi'i madhab through its filtering process determined to be al-maqbool. And the hukum you see in the Shafi'i madhab, they say we don't take this, that's what they determined to be al-mardood. Now that could differ with the Hanafi madhab, and it does differ. The Ahnaf and the Shafi'iyya, they differ in ahkam. But the filtering process that the Ahnaf adopted, that led them to determining that this report, a certain report that they acted upon, is al-maqbul, and a report that they left is considered mardud according to their filtering process, according to their ijtihad. So this entire discussion that we're going to have right now actually overlaps with the usuliyin and the fuqaha. And saying that we're only going to use the process of the muhaddithin and then use it as a hakim, a process to govern over the decision of the fuqaha and the usuliyun, that is dalilun bila, or that is da'wa bila dalil. In Arabic we call this tahakkum. We say the filtering process of the muhaddithin, where they get this from? It's based on qawaid aqliyah. It's based on rational deduction. It's based on ijtihad. Okay, how can you use your ijtihad and impose it on someone else who's also a mujtahid? That is not possible. That's not allowed. Yes, if it was revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sam'an wa ta'a, but it's not revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is a process of ijtihad, as we're going to study. The entire discussion over here we're going to have, inshallah, this entire course, this entire ilm discipline is to study this process of ijtihad. And it's a beautiful process. Not taking anything away from the process. But at the end of the day, it's a process from many different processes that have been outlined by the ulama, the scholars of Islam. And sometimes they differ. And a lot of times they will agree. But at times their process will result in different results, different conclusions, and therefore they can actually differ regarding what is al-maqbul and al-mardud. So this bahath over here is not specific to the muhaddithin. Rather, it's actually, in actuality, it's a bahath that actually is asalatan, by default, actually the main point of discussion amongst the usuliyin. The whole purpose of the discipline of usul al-fiqh is to determine ما الذي يعمل به وما الذي يترك في العمل به. Because العمل بالأشياء, that is fiqh. الأعمال, الأفعال, أفعال المكلف, that is fiqh. طيب. So المقبول, we say ما يجب العمل به. ما يجب العمل به. When a report is determined to be مقبول, يجب العمل به. But that process of determining it, فيه اجتهاد. طيب. And then he says لتوقف الاستدلال. طيب. Acting upon a report which is maqbul actually is dependent upon a number of conditions being found. Not just one condition. A number of conditions being found. And these conditions entail conditions that are discussed by the muhaddithin, and they also entail conditions that are discussed by the usuliyin. For example, the report shouldn't be such, even if according to the muhaddithin, for example, the chain is determined to be authentic, meaning it should be maqbul. But the report's actually abrogated, meaning it's mansukh. There's another hukum of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that came after that abrogates the first hukum. So do we say now yujibul amal? The initial report will do ijab of amal? The answer is no. The report should not be contradicting any other reports. So this is actually, all of this is from the process of filtering. All of this is from the process of filtering. And as we mentioned multiple times, one is looking at the chain, and then there's another matter which is looking at the actual meaning of the hadith. So for example, the Messenger says, غُسْلُ يَوْمِ الْجُمُعَةِ وَاجِبٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُحْتَلِمٍ. Or the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, الْمَاءُ مِنَ الْمَاءِ. When does ghusl become wajib? When the individual, he does inzal, meaning he fulfills his pleasure. Let's say someone, he has, for example, intercourse with his wife, and dukhul occurs, meaning they actually have intercourse, but he does not completely fulfill his pleasure. Inzal is not found. Do we say ghusl is wajib over there? So according to this hadith, al-ma'u min al-ma', ghusl is not wajib. And the hadith is authentic. There's no doubt in the hadith being authentic. But that hadith is abrogated. That hadith is abrogated. And the actual hukum that came after that, by the Messenger himself, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, is that as long as he fulfills his pleasure and dukhul occurs, then ghusl becomes wajib. So you have to look at, just determining that the chain is authentic is not enough. You have to look at the history. You have to look at other factors. Is it going against any other narration? غُسْلُ يَوْمِ الْجُمْعَةِ وَاجِبٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُحْتَلِمٍ. Fasting on the day of Jumu'ah is wajib upon everyone who is baligh. But then there's another hadith which says, مَنْ اغْتَسَلَ يَوْمَ الْجُمُعَةِ مَنْ تَوَضَّأَ يَوْمَ الْجُمُعَةِ فَبِهَا وَنِعْمَتْ وَمَنْ اغْتَسَلَ فَالْغُسْلُ أَفْضَلُ. So there's ta'arud. Now when there's ta'arud, which one do we give preference to? That's a discussion held by the usuliyin. So determining that the chain is authentic is not enough. لإيجاب العمل. بل يتوقف. There's other factors that have to be looked at. And those factors are discussed more by the usuliyun than they're discussed by the muhaddithun. طيب. So we say, للاستدلال والاحتجاج بدليل ما شروط كثيرة تذكر في كتب الأصوليين. There are a lot of conditions that are necessary in order to determine that something is maqbool versus mardud. We don't only look at the process of the muhaddithin. طيب. Then Al-Hāfidh ibn Hajar, he says, regarding Al-Aḥād, وقد يقع فيها ما يفيد العلم النظري بالقرائن على المختار. يا سلام. Allahu Akbar. Al-Hāfidh ibn Hajar, what does he say? It's possible that in Ahad, you're able to actually attain certain knowledge as well, that the Messenger said this, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, just like you would attain in Al-Mutawatir, according to the correct opinions, as long as there are qara'in, there are supporting evidences and external indicators that are found that this report should actually be from the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Like, this discussion is a discussion only that should only be found in the books of the Usuliyin. And the truth is, this is not a discussion of the Muhaddithin at all. And we mentioned our study of Nukhbat al Fikar, Ahbab, is not only going to be a study of what Al-Hāfidh ibn Hajar says, but it's going to be a critical study. And at times, we will actually disagree with what Al-Hāfidh ibn Hajar says. We will actually disagree with what Al-Hāfidh ibn Hajar says, rahimahullah ta'ala. Allahu Akbar. Are we in a point, or are we in a position that we can disagree with him? The answer is no. We are no one. But when Al-Hāfidh ibn Hajar is holding on to an opinion which is held by a minority of scholars, and the majority are on the other side, okay, and the evidences, when you present them, then it's clearly evident that the majority is far more stronger in this understanding, then we don't have to follow the opinion of Al-Hāfidh ibn Hajar in that regard. Al-Hāfidh ibn Hajar is a Shafi'i scholar, and a lot of times, because the mutaakhirun from the Shafi'iyya, they mention a number of discussions that the usuliyun from the Shafi'iyya mention in their books. They mention it in the books of hadith, in the books of mustalah. So a student who's only studying mustalah might think this is actually the opinion of the muhaddithin, when in reality, the entire discussion is taken from the books of usul al-fiqh, like this discussion. What is this discussion? The usuliyun, in order to understand what he's mentioning over here, we have to understand first, the usuliyun, they divide the madarik, the understanding that a person can have in his mind, into 5 categories. Number 1 is al-ilm. When they use the term al-ilm, they're referring to al-i'tiqad al-jazim al-mutabiq lil-waqi', which is justified true belief. And you'll study this in the books of usul. When they use the term al-ilm, they're referring to certain knowledge, not knowledge which is possible, rather knowledge which is attained by way of certainty. Number 1. Or knowledge which is certain. So the first of the categories is al-ilm. When they use the term al-ilm, they're referring to certain belief which is justified. Number 2 is al-dhan. When they use the term al-dhan, they're referring to al-i'tiqad al-rajih ma ihtimal al-naqid. 90%, 85%. Where the person has a belief and he feels very confident in the belief, but he doesn't have certainty. It's not 100%. So 90% he's sure. This is also a belief. It's al-i'tiqad. It's a belief. He feels something. He believes in something. But it's not 100% in his heart. It's 90%. Then we have ash-shak. Ash-shak is when it's 50-50. When the person is 50-50. Literally 50-50. So he's confused. Neither is he on this side or on that side. And number 4, they say, is al-wahm. Al-wahm is when he is 20-30%. And number 5 is al-jahl, where he has the complete misunderstanding. In al-jahl, he also has al-i'tiqad al-jazim, but it is completely wrong. It is completely wrong. طيب. So the usuliyu, number 1, they divided the madarik of ilm, yani the perception that a person has in his mind at any given moment regarding any given thing can be from 5 categories. Either he has certain belief regarding it or he doesn't. That certain belief, when it's in line with actuality and fact, and the facts, is called knowledge. When it's totally opposite of the actuality and the fact, it's called jahl. And then in between, they have other categories. They have other categories. طيب. Then they take knowledge, and the usuliyun mention that knowledge is actually of two types, meaning 100% certain belief, 100% certain belief is of two types. Number one, that which is by way of necessity and does not require any rational deduction. That which is by way of necessity and does not require any rational deduction, they call this al-ilm al-daruri. They call this al-ilm al-daruri. So where Al-Aḥād ibn Hajar said, فَالْأَوَّلُ الْمُتَوَاتِرُ الْمُفِيدُ لِلْعِلْمِ الْيَقِينِيِّ بِشُرُوطِهِ, he should have said over there لِلْعِلْمِ الضَّرُورِ. He should not have said لِلْعِلْمِ الْيَقِينِ. Why? Because al-mutawatir does not only give you the benefit of yaqeen, which is certainty, it also gives you the benefit of al-ilm al-daruri. And what is al-ilm al-daruri? Al-ilm al-daruri, they define it as the one that does not require any rational deduction, rather anyone, so the young, the old, all of them are able to determine that this is certain. And that is the knowledge al-mutawatir gives you. Not only yaqeen. So yaqeen actually, al-ilm over here, al-i'tiqad al-jazim al-mutabiq lil-waqi', this is yaqeen. According to usuliyun, this divides into two categories. Number one is al-ilm al-daruri. And that is what mutawatir gives you the benefit of. And number two is al-ilm al-nadari. And they also call it al-ilm al-istidlali, and they also call it al-ilm al-iktisabi, although according to the correct opinion, there's a difference between al-ilm al-iktisabi and al-ilm al-istidlali, but you'll study that in the later levels. But overall, you can say al-ilm al-daruri is on one side, and the second category of yaqeen, which is also knowledge, which requires a degree of rational deduction. What is the difference between al-ilm al-daruri and al-ilm al-nadari? The difference is al-ilm al-daruri does not require any rational deduction. It's like 1 + 1 = 2. Like 1 + 1 = 2 is as true as a complicated formula in calculus. Meaning they're both mathematical facts. They are equally true. They're both 100% certain. But the difference between 1 + 1 = 2 and that complicated mathematical formula is that 1 + 1 = 2, everyone, whether they're young or old, understands that and immediately is able to arrive at that conclusion. Whereas 1 + 1, or this complicated mathematical formula, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or some other complicated mathematical formula that they bring, those formulas require a degree of practice and a rational deduction that leads them towards that certainty. And not everyone is able to do it. So the difference between al-ilm al-daruri and al-ilm al-nadari is that al-ilm al-daruri is attained by everyone. And that's the type of knowledge, certain knowledge, that mutawatir grants you. And al-ilm al-nadari is that knowledge, which also is certain knowledge, but it requires a process of rational deduction. Like, the question is it possible that Aḥād, we said al-mutawatir is granting us yaqeen, but what type of yaqeen is it granting us? Al-ilm al-daruri. Is it possible that Aḥād, which is other than tawatur, al-mashhur, al-aziz, and al-gharib, can they also grant al-ilm, al-yaqeen, ilm in the meaning of yaqeen, certainty, by way of rational deduction, al-ilm al-nadari? So again, we said yaqeen, according to the usuliyun, divides into two categories. Daruri, which is attained by everyone, and nadari, which requires rational deduction. Can we say Aḥād? We said they necessitate amal. Everyone agrees they necessitate amal. Yani al-Aḥād tufidu wujub al-amal, as long as they're maqbool. But is it possible that they can also grant yaqeen by way of al-ilm al-nadari? Like, what's the difference between the two? We said in mutawatir, ahbab, we said in mutawatir that the hukum is, if someone were to deny it, he becomes a kafir. If it's proven to him that this is tawatur, proven from the Messenger of Islam, this has been transmitted from the Messenger of Islam by way of tawatur, if someone denies that, it's like he's denying something he's hearing from the Messenger directly, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and that is kufr. And if you're able to say that Aḥād, the reports that are not massively transmitted, can also grant you certainty, then the same hukum would apply over here. So the person who denies them will become a kafir. And that is a big deal. Why? Because when you say ahad tufidul yaqeen, that means the one who denies these ahad potentially is at the doorstep of kufr. That is a big deal. So now, when we say the usuliyun have held this discussion, is it possible that the ahad, we know tawatur gives you al-ilm al-daruri. Everyone agrees with that. Everyone says that. Is it possible al-ahad beyond ijab al-amal, can they also raise to the level of al-ilm al-nadari, which is granting certainty and yaqeen, but by way of rational deduction? Is that possible or is it not possible? Is it possible or is it not possible? This is a discussion that's held by the usuliyun, and this is not a discussion of the muhaddithin at all. It's from the ulum aqliyah, although the muhaddithun have entered it into their, or the later muhaddithin such as Ibn Hajar and so on and so forth, they've entered it into their works. طيب. So now we're going to mention this mabhas from the books of the usuliyun, and we're going to mention what is the correct opinion amongst the usuliyin and the majority held opinion amongst the usuliyin, and I want to see what Al-Aḥād Ibn Hajar says rahimahullah ta'ala, and the mistakes that are being made over here. طيب. We say اختلف في هذه المسألة. There is اختلاف in this مسألة. Al-Qadi Adud al-Din al-Iji in his sharh upon Mukhtasar ibn al-Hajib, he says اختلف في خبر الواحد العدل. And again, when they're saying خبر الواحد, they're referring to what? They're not referring to ما نقله واحد عن واحد. They're referring to everything other than تواتر. ما لم يجمع شروط التواتر. He says اختلف في خبر الواحد العدل. If the reporter, the narrator, is authentic and trustworthy, they differed regarding this type of a khabar into three opinions. Al-Mukhtar, leave Al-Mukhtar for now. The three opinions are: number one, if there are qara'in, it will grant you the benefit of al-ilm, which is al-ilm al-nadari, okay, by way of rational deduction. They're able to grant that if there is a qarina, or there are supporting evidences attached. طيب. This is the opinion Al-Hāfidh Ibn Hajar is referencing from the usuliyun. Yani usuliyun, this is one of the opinions they hold, that if there are qara'in, as long as there are qara'in, and we're going to mention what's intended by qara'in, and over here there's also an important point. If there are qara'in, supporting evidences, then it will grant al-ilm al-yaqeen. Yufidu al-ilm over here, al-ilm over here refers to al-yaqeen, and that's going to be ilm nadari. That's one opinion, and that is the opinion Al-Hāfidh Ibn Hajar says is preferred. That's one opinion amongst the usuliyun. The other opinion amongst the usuliyun is, even if there's no qarina, it still grants yaqeen. And that is an extremely weak opinion. But then they differ into two categories. Does it always grant yaqeen with no qarina? Or does it sometimes grant yaqeen and sometimes doesn't grant yaqeen? So is it muttarid or is it غير muttarid? Muttarid would mean it's always granting yaqeen, and غير muttarid would mean that sometimes it grants yaqeen and at times it doesn't have to grant yaqeen. طيب. So the second group, they say even without qarina it grants yaqeen. The majority of the usuliyun, khalafan wa salafan, yani throughout the centuries, have said neither with a qarina or without a qarina can a khabar wahid grant you yaqeen. So the madahib are four. The opinions amongst the usuliyun are four. What are they? Over here. Number one, أنه يفيد العلم عند انضمام القرائن فقط وهو المختار عند ابن الحاجب والإيجي. The opinion which was adopted by Ibn al-Hajib and al-Iji, Qadi Adud al-Din al-Iji, they feel that khabar wahid can give you benefit and yaqeen if there are qara'in supporting external evidences that are also found. طيب. Number one, what do they mean when they say عند انضمام القرائن? Al-qarina, qarina is a supporting factor, a supporting evidence. The example they mention of this in the books of Usul al-Fiqh. In order to understand the qarina, we have to mention the example and understand what they intended in their own books. Number one, the example they mention of a supporting external evidence. Let's say there's a person, you go to someone's house, and as you get close to the house, you see that there's a lot of cars parked outside. And then you go, you knock on the door, and you're greeted by a person who is crying or you can tell that they've just been crying from their face. And he barely says salam to you, and he enters you into a room, and in that room you see a number of people gathered, and they're all extremely down and depressed, and no one's speaking, and they're all just sitting. So you look to the person beside you and you say, what's going on? So he tells you that Zayd, who was a child that lived in that house, passed away. Like, over here, do we call this khabar wahid or is this tawatur? We say, according to our understanding, this is khabar wahid. And only one individual is telling you that Zayd passed away. Only one person told you Zayd passed away. And that is a report that's being transmitted. You didn't see Zayd passing away. You didn't see his janazah. All you seen is a bunch of cars outside. People are sad. You sat. Everyone's crying. And this one individual tells you that Zayd, the child who lived over here that was 10 years old, passed away. Do you attain certainty that Zayd passed away? They say, yes, you attain certainty that Zayd passed away. The question over here is, qara'in, the supporting evidences, can actually be divided into two categories. One is, we say, supporting evidences fi nafsil mukhbir, that go back to the one reporting the report, the one narrating and transmitting the report himself. And there are some supporting evidences and qara'in that are not in the reporter and the narrator, but rather they are external. According to the example we mentioned, the reason why you're attaining certainty, is it because you feel the person telling you is extremely trustworthy? Is it because you feel the person telling you is 100% telling the truth? Is it feel because you have never heard the person telling you this report? You never heard him lie? Or is it because of all of the external factors that you see? We say it's because of the external factors that you see. So when the usuliyun speak about this mas'ala, they are not referring to the qara'in, as he says over here, وَعَنَا بِهِ الزَّائِدَةِ. What is زائدة? يعني أن المراد بالقرائن القرائن المنفصلة غير اللازمة من أحوال الخبر والمخبر والمخبر عنه. What are they referring to when they say the qara'in? They're referring to the qara'in that are external, that have nothing to do with the person telling you. And that's why they say, if you look at this mabhath in the books of usul, they say in this scenario, according to the first opinion, they don't even care whether the person giving the khabar is a fasiq or adil or he's trustworthy or not trustworthy. That's irrelevant. They still say it's grand siqin. Because the qara'in they're referring to are external qara'in. They're not referring to qara'in in the khabar or in the mukhbir. Yani the one reporting it. The one reporting it. So the first opinion according to the usuliyin in the books of usul is that ahad, if there are external factors, like what you see outside, irregardless of who tells you, if there are external factors, separate factors that are supporting the report, you can actually attain certainty by way of that report. And the reason they say this is because each one of these external factors is like a report in of itself. So in a way, it actually becomes like tawatur. The first person you've seen who's sad, even if he doesn't tell you بِلِسَانِ قَوْلِهِ لِسَانُ حَالِهِ يَقُولُ لَكْ هُنَاكَ شَيْءٍ. Even if he doesn't tell you something explicitly, the way he meets you, you understand something from him. And then every single thing that you're seeing, all of that is acting like a report in of itself. And it's making you come to this conclusion. So in a reality, the usuliyun that said this type of scenario will grant you ilm, even if it's a khabar wahid, they're talking about a scenario where in their minds is actually like tawatur. And they're not referring to qara'in fi nafs al-mukhbir. They're not referring, in fact, according to them, according to Al-Aḥād ibn al-Iji, when they say this is the opinion that we feel is correct, لا يتقيد فيها بالعدالة لأن التعويل فيه على القرائن. They don't even look at the adala of the rawi. The rawi could be a fasiq. Even then they'll say it gives you yaqeen. Even then they say it will give you yaqeen because the hukum over here is because of the qara'in. It's not because of the riwayah. It's not because of the report itself. It's not because of the report itself. So the first opinion according to the usuliyin is Al-Aḥād tufidu al-ilm al-nadari inda انضمام القرائن الزائدة. That is the first opinion. The second opinion, that is a very minority held opinion, is يفيد العلم مطلقا على اضطراد. It will always grant knowledge as long as the rawi is authentic. And this is a very weak opinion that was held by certain muhaddithin, and therefore they mentioned it in their works. That it will always grant you yaqeen as long as, it's always going to grant you yaqeen as long as the rawi is adil. So if the rawi is adil, we treat it like it's mutayaqqan bihi. Yani, even if the hadith is gharib, like إنما الأعمال بالنيات في أربع طبقات is gharib, as long as the ruwat are all adil, then this grants us yaqeen that the Messenger said this, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And this is extremely dangerous, because that will mean anyone that denies any hadith in Bukhari or Muslim, he's a kafir. Not only is he held accountable, he's a kafir, because it's as if he's denying something directly that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said. وهذا محل إشكال كبير جدا جدا جدا. طيب, the third opinion is أنه يفيده لا على اضطراد, that it does grant ilm, not always, but at the same time, even though the rawi is adil, sometimes it can grant ilm and sometimes it doesn't grant ilm. So these two opinions are held by a minority, okay? And amongst the usuliyun, these are weak opinions, because they're not looking at qara'in at all. They don't even care about the qara'in. As long as the rawi is authentic, it is able to grant yaqeen. وَفِيهِ مَا فِيهِ. The fourth opinion is لا يفيده أصلا بل إنما يفيد الظن فقط. The khabar wahid does not grant al-ilm al-yaqini at all. Rather, it only grants al-dhan. Al-dhan. Meaning al-dhan is al-dhan al-ghalib. It can grant you 99%, 95%, 90%, 85%. But it cannot grant you yaqeen, even if there is qara'in. Qara'in kharijiyya. Okay, now this is the way this mabhath is mentioned by the usuliyun, and we're going to mention in the end, we're going to give tarjih to this fourth opinion, because this is the opinion adopted by the majority of the usuliyun from the Hanafiyya and from the Shafi'iyya. طيب. But this is the way the mas'ala is presented. You have to conceptualize and understand proper tasawwur of the mas'ala. طيب. What is Al-Aḥād ibn Hajar after presenting this statement over here? He says, وقد يقع فيها يعني في الآحاد ما يفيد العلم النظرية بالقرائن على المختار. What does Al-Hāfidh ibn Hajar say in نزهة النظر? Al-Hāfidh ibn Hajar says this khilaf is actually a khilaf lafzi. He says والخلاف في التحقيق لفظي لأن من جوز إطلاق العلم قيده بكونه نظريا وهو الحاصل عن الاستدلال ومن أبى الإطلاق خص لفظ العلم بالمتواتر وما عداه عنده ظني لكنه لا ينفي أن ما احتف بالقرائن أرجح مما خلا عنها. طيب, what he says over here does not tell you that it's a khilaf lafzi. It is a khilaf haqiqi. It's mentioned in their books with detail, and they've elaborated on it more. So the ones that say لا يفيد العلم, they don't agree that it gives even al-ilm al-nadari. And the ones that say يفيد العلم, some of them say it gives you ilm yaqini even without nadar. So in reality, this statement is not correct. It's not a khilaf lafzi. It's a khilaf haqiqi. It is a khilaf haqiqi. And they are not, when he says ومن أبى الإطلاق خص لفظ العلم بالمتواتر هذا غير صحيح. الأصوليون لم يخصوا العلم بالمتواتر. الأصوليون لم يخصوا العلم بالمتواتر. They said ilm can be attained by way of tawatur. It can also be attained by way of other things. It can be attained by way of nadar, according to all of the usuliyin. It can also be attained by way of nadar. And it can also be called al-ilm al-nadari. So they believe in al-ilm al-silali and al-ilm al-iktisabi. So in reality, it's not a khilaf lafzi, it is a khilaf haqiqi. Like, that's the first thing. The second thing, we say this mas'ala was also mentioned by Sahib Musallam al-Thubut, and it was also mentioned by Ibn al-Humam in At-Tahrir, which these are all books in comparative usul. And before that, it was mentioned by At-Talwih. And the correct opinion in this is لا يفيد العلم بقرينة ولا بدون قرينة, and that is the opinion held by the majority of the usuliyin. Al-Bazdawi, he says in Kanz al-Wusul, يوجب غلبة الظن إذا اجتمع الشرائط التي نذكرها إن شاء الله تعالى وهي كافية لوجوب العمل. And صاحب المسلم, he says, الأكثر على أن الخبر الواحد إن لم يكن معصوما لا يفيد العلم مطلقا. Okay, and with the شرح of الأنصاري, من الأكثر من أهل الأصول ومنهم الأئمة الثلاثة other than Imam Ahmad. على أن خبر الواحد إن لم يكن هذا الواحد المخبر معصوما نبيا لا يفيد العلم مطلقا سواء احتف بالقرائن أو لا. طيب. This is the discussion held by the أصوليين. طيب. This takes us to another point. When Al-Hāfid ibn Hajar says over here, وقد يقع فيها ما يفيد العلم النظري بالقرائن على المختار. We mentioned that in the actual books of the أصوليين, when there's referring to, when even the opinion that says يفيد العلم النظري بالقرائن, which is the first opinion, right? Which Ibn Hajib preferred. When they said قرائن, they were not referring to قرائن في نفس المخبر. They're referring to قرائن which are external قرائن. طيب. Al-Hāfid ibn Hajar actually takes this discussion from Ibn al-Salah rahimahullah ta'ala. Ibn al-Salah rahimahullah ta'ala in Muqaddimah, what does he say? He made the claim that the riwayah of Ash-Shaykhain, meaning the riwayah which is mentioned in Bukhari and Muslim, tufidu, the riwayah of Ash-Shaykhain تفيد العلم النظري لتلقي الأمة لهما بالقبول. According to him, the riwayah of Ash-Shaykhain, يعني the riwayah which is mentioned by Al-Imam al-Bukhari and Al-Imam al-Muslim in their Sahihain, this will grant al-ilm al-nadari. Why? Because the Ummah accepted these two books and considered them the most authentic books after the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the da'wah that Ibn al-Salah rahimahullah ta'ala made. And Ibn al-Salah rahimahullah ta'ala, he knows that in reality there are hadith in Sahihain that are ahad. For example, the first hadith, إنما الأعمال بالنيات, is gharib fi arba' tabaqat. But then he's saying, because the Ummah accepted that these two books are the most authentic books after the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hadith that are in these books are actually giving al-ilm al-nadari. Like, this is a big mistake. And it's a big statement. And the effect of this statement, it entails massive consequences. Massive consequences from an usuli perspective. Because if you say these are 100% the statement of the Messenger of Allah, all the ahadith that are mentioned in Bukhari and Muslim, anyone who denies any one of these ahadith will be considered a kafir. He's going against directly what the statement of the Messenger of Allah is, as if he's hearing it from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that opinion is not held by anyone. The kufr of the one who goes against these ahadith is not held by anyone. So this statement that Ibn Salah made is a very problematic statement. طيب. That's why An-Nawawi, he's also a Shafi'i. Okay, but An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala is a massive faqih as well. He was very well versed in fiqh and usul as well. So he says regarding what Ibn Salah says, وَهَذَا خِلَافُ مَا قَالَهُ الْمُحَقِّقُونَ. This is wrong. This is wrong. Ibn Salah's opinion over here is wrong. It's against what the muhaqqiqun are saying and the majority of saying, مِنْ أَنَّهَا تُفِيدُ الظَّنِّ فَإِنَّهَا آحَاد. They are ahad. They give you the benefit of dhann. They cannot give you al-ilm al-nadari, al-yaqeen. Okay? وتلقي الأمة إنما أفادنا وجوب العمل بما فيهما كالأحاديث التي في غيرهما لا يعمل به حتى يبحث عنه ويوجد فيه الصحة ولا يلزم من إجماع الأمة على العمل بما فيهما إجماعهم على أنه مقطوع. طيب. تلقي الأمة is only telling you it's dhan and according to the qawa. طيب. Number one, the Ummah over here has ijma' upon what? The Ummah never had ijma' that 100% everything inside the book is a statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Hanafi madhab still exists, the Maliki madhab still exists, the Shafi'i madhab still exists, and the Hanbali madhab still exists. And in all four madhab, they leave these statements of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they never had ijma' that 100% everything inside these books is a statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Practically, they've never acted upon everything inside those books. The madhab still exist. Their ijma' that occurred is that according to the qawa'id of the muhaddithin, that filtering process, this is the greatest level of authentication that is attained if you apply that filtering process. But even that filtering process is not agreed upon by everyone. In actuality, in practicality. So the ijma' of the ummah is mahallu nadar jiddan over here. And even if we say the ijma' occurred, what did the ijma' occur upon? To not occur upon the fact that those statements are directly the statements of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. على أنه مقطوع بأنه من كلام النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Rather, it occurred upon what? That if you apply the filter process of the muhaddithin, then this would be the greatest level of authenticity. That's what it occurred upon. طيب. And in Ima'an al-Nadar, he also says, يعني, a number of scholars have done shadid rad upon this statement of Ibn Salah rahimahullah ta'ala. But the Musannif, يعني Ibn Hajar, he ended up agreeing with what Ibn Salah said, and before Ibn Hajar al-Bulqini, and they followed Ibn Taymiyyah in this understanding. And like we're going to mention, there's a further mistake in this. The second mistake is that when we mentioned the opinion of the usuliyun, when they said qara'in, they're not referring to qara'in fi nafs al-mukhbir. طيب, the qara'in of the muhaddithin, all of them are qara'in fi nafs al-mukhbir. They're not using external evidences. It's not like the example of, even if we say, can we make this opinion fall in line with the first opinion of the muhaddithin? The answer is no. Why? Because the first opinion of the muhaddithin is referring to qara'in that are external factors, and not qara'in fi nafs al-mukhbir. But the opinion which is held by Ibn Salah over here is referring to qara'in fi nafs al-mukhbir. Because the muhaddithun look for qara'in in the mukhbir, the narrator himself. Is he adil? Is he thiqa? Is he hafiz? Is he mutqin? Al-Bukhari preferring that hadith or determining that hadith as authentic based on what qarina? Based on what filtering process? Based on the filtering process that has to do with the qara'in, to do with the mukhbir. Not qara'in that are kharijiyah. Not zawaid. There's no other qarina outside that is telling us this is the hadith of the Messenger or the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So to take this scenario that Al-Hafiz, that Ibn Salah mentioned, and compare it to the first scenario that is mentioned by the usuliyun, even this is invalid. Even this is invalid. And that's why Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar in Nukhbat al Fikar, he mentions qara'in. He's like, from the qara'in is that the shaykhain reported. From the qara'in is that the rawi has been agreed upon by everyone. And all of the qara'in Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar which will mention in Nukhbat al Fikar are all qara'in fi nafs al-mukhbir. And that's not what the usuliyun referred to. Even in the minority that held the first opinion, that is not what they were referring to. That is not what they were referring to. طيب. So now we'll mention the statement of Al-Ansari in his Sharh in Fawatih al-Rahamut upon Musallam al-Thubut. He says, وَهَذَا بُهْتٌ. This is completely, it's like out of the ballpark, right? You're coming with something which is where are you getting this from? He says, فَإِنَّمَا مَنْ رَجَعَ إِلَى وُجْدَانِهِ يَعْلَمُ بِالضَّرُورَةِ, regarding the da'wah of Ibn Salah, أَنَّ مُجَرَّدَ رِوَايَتِهِمَا يعني الشيخين لا يوجب اليقين البتة. Just think about it. Just the fact that it's found in Bukhari and Muslim, how can this entail certainty that the Messenger said sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Why? He says, وَقَدْ رُوِيَ فِيهِمَا أَخْبَارٌ مُتَنَاقِضَةٌ. They themselves, in their works, are sometimes bringing a hadith that are contradicting. And we'll, inshallah, when you study Bukhari and Muslim, you will find this. And they do it intentionally. It's not that they didn't want to do it. They purposely do it to show an illah. This is found in Bukhari and Muslim in so many places. Not only one place, in many places. So are we then saying that the statements of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to contradict himself? Of course not. Imam Muslim gives ishara towards ilal in his sahih. Imam Bukhari gives ishara towards ilal in his sahih. So trying and saying that this is 100% the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is a big mistake. Then he says, فَلَوْ أَفَادَتْ رِوَايَتُهُمَا عِلْمًا لَزِمَ تَحَقُّقُ النَّقِيضَيْنِ فِي الْوَاقِعِ عَنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم. طيب, if you believe in this, that is kufr. So in reality, someone might not understand what this statement entails in terms of mashakil, but it's a very dangerous statement. Extremely dangerous statement. The ahadith in Sahihain, sometimes the Musannif, Imam Bukhari, intentionally brings a hadith to show there's an illah inside of it. On multiple occasions. And inshallah, when you study these works, a number of these examples will be mentioned. And Imam Muslim does it even more than Bukhari. So they're purposely bringing a hadith that contradict each other. So if you're saying everything 100% is the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then are you trying to claim that the Messenger was contradicting himself sallallahu alaihi wasallam? If you believe that, that is kufr. So we cannot say this statement. And then he says, again, what's in the brackets will be the statement of Musallam, Sahib al-Musallam, and what's outside the brackets is the Sharih. He says, وَهَذَا أي ما ذهب إليه ابن الصلاح واتباعه بخلاف ما قاله الجمهور من الفقهاء والمحدثين. This is against what the majority of the fuqaha and the muhaddithin have said. Why? The ijma' never occurred that everything inside Bukhari and Muslim is actually the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The ijma' simply occurred that they are, if you apply the filtering process of the muhaddithin, from the most authentic works after the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's if you apply the filtering process of the muhaddithin, and even that is not applied by everyone, because the fuqaha of the Hanafiya don't apply it, and the fuqaha of the Malikiyya don't apply it. In fact, the majority of the people on the planet right now, for example, are Hanafi. So the majority of the people on the planet don't believe in this currently. Practically, they don't act upon it. They don't have to act upon the lawazim of considering that filtering process in Bukhari is the best filtering process out there. طيب. And then he says, ولأن جلالة شأنهما وتلقي الأمة لكتابيهما والإجماع على المزية ولو سلم لا يستلزم ذلك القطع والعلم فإن القدر المسلم المتلقى بين الأمة ليس إلا أن رجال what is the Ummah doing إجماع upon أن رجال مروياتهما جامعة للشروط التي اشترطها الجمهور من المحدثين لقبول روايتهم وهذا لا يفيد إلا الظن because the entire ilm of hadith the filtering process that muhaddithun use all of that is based on ظن وأما أن مروياتهما ثابتة عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فلا إجماع عليه أصلا. Okay, in fact, in their books there are Qadariyun and Ahlul Bid'ah and some scholars. That's why Abu Hatim al-Razi, Abu Zur' al-Razi leave غير المحدثين. Abu Hatim al-Razi, Abu Zur' al-Razi are not even trusting the riwayah of Bukhari. Rahimahullah ta'ala. They did kalam even upon al-Bukhari. So even within the muhaddithun, they're not agreeing upon everything which is in Sahihain. Ad-Daraqutni comes and he mentions a number of hadith where he says these are problematic in Bukhari. Again, we're not going to the details of that, but we're trying to show that how is there ijma'? When did ijma' occur? Okay, then he says غاية ما يلزم أن أحاديثهما أصح الصحيح على طريقة المحدثين وهذا لا يفيد إلا الظن القوي. That's why Ibn al-Humam, what did he say? إن قولهم بتقديم مروياتهما على مرويات الأئمة الآخرين قول لا يعتد به ولا يقتدى به بل هو من تحكماتهم الصرفة كيف لا وأن الأصحية من تلقاء عدالة الرواة وقوة ضبطهم. يعني that's the basis of this أصحية, the طريقة of the muhaddithin. And even according to this tariqah, if the same adala and quwwah is found in other than them, even Imam Bukhari himself says, I wasn't trying to gather all of the sahih. Like he himself is telling you that there are other ahadith that are sahih, that are at the same level as the ones in my book. It's just, I wasn't trying to gather everything. So how does that mean you cannot find the same level in other than their books? Of course you can. طيب. So he says, وَالتَّحَكُّمْ لَا يُلْتَفَتُ إِلَيْهِ فَافْهَمْ. Okay. So this is according to the ijma' of the tariqah of the muhaddithin. And in no way are we saying that. So if we go back, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala over here in his statement, وَقَدْ يَقَعُ فِيهَا مَا يُفِيدُ الْعِلْمَ النَّظَرِيَّ بِالْقَرَائِنِ عَلَى الْمُخْتَارِ. He's following Ibn Salah. There are a number of mistakes over here. Number one, the majority of the A'immah don't agree with this. لا تفيد حتى ولا العلم النظري. And number two, with the qara'in that Ibn Hajar is suggesting, which is qara'in fi nafs al-mukhbir, if you look at Nuzha, and the qara'in that Ibn Salah suggested, 100%, they're not fine with it. The majority of the usuliyin, the vast majority, over 90%, 99%, will say this is not the correct correct opinion amongst the usuliyin. And since this is a mabhath usuli, and it's not a mabhath of the muhaddithin to begin with, this is why we say man takallam. And if you mention a discussion, and Ibn Hajar himself in subhanallah, in Nuzhat al-Nadhr, he actually says the mabhath of tawatur and whatnot is not a mabhath of the muhaddithin to begin with. When we cross over into other ulum, if you're not well versed in that ilm and how they're presenting the discussion of that ilm, naturally there will be mistakes that are found. Naturally there will be mistakes that are found. That's why we always have to keep in mind, ahbab, لا أحد يحيط بالعلم. There is no one on the planet that has ihata bil ilm, encompasses all ilm. No one after the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even the Sahaba were not such. That one single Sahabi had all the ilm of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we, as individuals, as students of knowledge, we are careful when it comes to the kalam of the ulama of the past. And we understand, yes, certain ulama were very strong in certain ulum, like Al-Hāfidh ibn Hajar, al-Ra's wal-Ayn. You say, إذا قالت حزامي فصدقوها فإن القول ما قالت حزامي. والحافظ هو هذا في علم الحديث خاصة. أما علم المصطلح، أما علم أصول الفقه فلا. علم الأصول has its own ulama, its own scholars. And when they're mentioning masail of usul in the works of mustalah, then this will cause this misunderstanding amongst a lot of the students that only study mustalah and they don't study usul to begin with, that this is actually the opinion of the scholars of hadith, when in reality it's not a mabhath discussed by the books of hadith or the scholars of hadith to begin with. It's a mas'ala usuliyya mahdan. طيب. فكل مسألة ننظر فيها إلى العلم الذي يبحث عن هذه المسألة. طيب. Now this is the akhbar amongst the muhaddithin. And again, it's not actually amongst the muhaddithin, it's mentioned amongst the usuliyun from the later muhaddithin, but it was adopted later on by the mutaakhirin as if this is the opinion of the muhaddithin. Even this type of categorization, mutawatir, mashhur, gharib, aziz, this is not an opinion of the muhaddithin. The early muhaddithin were not upon this. This is an opinion adopted by the later muhaddithin, and as if it was accepted as a tariq of the muhaddithin, when in reality it's not the tariq of muhaddithin. In fact, a lot of the early muhaddithin were more in line with the second opinion and the third opinion, which is a very minority held opinion. And that's why they were so mutashaddid in anyone who would go against the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and that tashaddud is not valid. It's not correct. طيب. As for the Ahnaf, they have another understanding when it comes to the types of akhbar. According to them, the akhbar are three categories: mutawatir, mashhur, and ahad. As for mutawatir, it's the same definition as the muhaddithin. But as for mashhur, according to them, it's that report which in the qurun mufaddala, in the first three generations, it gains shuhra and is accepted by the ulama. Even if initially it starts off with only one narrator or two narrators. So even if in the initial tabaqa of the Sahaba or the tabaqa of the Tabi'in, there's only one or two narrators, and then in the third tabaqa, the tabaqa of the Atba'u Tabi'in, it gains shuhra, they consider this riwayah to be mashhur. They consider it to be mashhur. And khabar al-wahid ma la yastuqu alayhi at-ta'rifan will be something that even within the qurun mufaddala, it wasn't able to gain shuhra. طيب, where is the end of qurun mufaddala? We say the end of the qurun mufaddala, according to them, is around, we say 100 to 120. Not beyond that. Not beyond that. And this is very important as well. You'll study this in later books. But considering the qurun mufaddala to continue beyond 120, 130, this is, wallahu a'lam, a very difficult stance. And what is, according to the Ahnaf, when they say that mashhur is what attained shuhra within the qurun mufaddala, their understanding, there are two opinions amongst them. Some say that mutawatir, shuhra, in this meaning, which gained shuhra within the qurun mufaddala, is actually a type of tawatur. That was held by Abu Bakr al-Jassas al-Razi. But the majority hold the opinion of Isa ibn Aban, and later on it was adopted by greats in the Hanafi madhab such as Abu Zayd al-Dabusi, and when they say al-Shaykhain over here, they're referring to al-Bazdawi and al-Sarakhsi and Amatul Mutaakhirin that followed them. What was the opinion? It was the opinion that it grants what's known as ilm tuma'nina, which is an ilm between ilm daruri and dhan, which is given by ahad. So mutawatir, according to them, is granting ilm daruri. Mashhur, according to their understanding of mashhur, is granting ilm tuma'nina, and ahad are granting dhan. طيب. However, the difference between ilm daruri and ilm tuma'nina is al-ilm al-daruri, which is proven by way of tawatur, yukaffaru jahiduhu. Amma ilm tuma'nina la yukaffaru jahiduhu. But in terms of amal, in terms of fiqh, they're both treated the same. And you learn more regarding this in their books of usul al-fiqh to understand how this plays a pivotal role. And this is actually from the Furuq Jawhariyya Ahbab. The entire process of the Ahnaf is not in line with the process of the Muhaddithin. From A to Z, it's a completely different outlook. Completely different outlook. And in fact, the process of the Muhaddithin, which is adopted by the later Muhaddithin, is more in line with the usul of the Shafi'iyya. And hence they differed in a lot of ahkam. And they differed in tasih and tad'if. And they differed in maqbool and mardud. And that resulted in their differences in ahkam in the end. طيب, so this is the understanding of the Ahnaf. Of course, you'll study more detail regarding that in the actual books of usul al-fiqh in the Al-Hanafiyya. طيب, with this, we have completed the hukum regarding Al-Aḥād. We spent a little bit more time regarding this discussion, but it's a very, very important discussion. Rewatch the recording multiple times so you can digest these matters and truly understand where this mabhath is meant to be held, and the mistakes that are being transmitted by claiming that this is actually, or entering this into the books of Mustalah al-Hadith. Wallahu a'lam. We'll continue, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, in the next lesson.